Hello again. Um, haven't posted in a little while. I've been thinking about how to proceed. So the last video, as far as story-wise, was David Koresh has called me in approximately April, sometime in April of 1990, and I need I need to tell that story. But before I tell that story, I have to back up a bit and tell about more about when I got the tape from Mark Bro and tell a little bit of that story. When I got the tape, I became very zealous for my new found faith. I guess I'll put it like, in other words, my newfound faith that David Koresh is wrong. Was very liberating because, as I described, I'm in a mental trap and I was in a spiral of fear and confusion. But now my mind has been freed to think about other possibilities, right? So one of the things that I did was I made a copy of the tape and I sent it to my father. My thinking at the time was that, well, I mean, it was so obvious to me. How can you listen to the tape and not, oh yeah, okay, David Koresh is wrong. I'm being naive. Okay, I tend to do that maybe, especially when I was younger, to get a little. I'm not. Especially, I should have known my father is not. Yeah, my father is not the most. Well, he's passed away. My father was not the most rational person. Like, he was even more trapped in a pit of fear, I would say, than I was. Let me tell a little bit about my father so you can understand what kind of person he was. So my father was raised a Seventh-day Adventist from the age of 10. So he was born in 1930. So this would have been 1940. And his experience being raised a Seventh-day Adventist was not positive for him. He had a difficult relationship with his parents, and there was a teacher that he was involved with at a Seventh-day Adventist school that really, he didn't tell the story in details, but just hated a Seventh-day Adventist teacher. So the result of this is, by the time my father is an adult, he doesn't want anything to do with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And this is not because he disagrees with the doctrine. It's because he doesn't like Seventh-day Adventists. I know that seemed like, what do you mean he doesn't like Seventh-day Adventists? It's just people. I can't really explain precisely what's going on in his head. I can only tell you what he said, and that is he didn't like Seventh-day Adventists. Okay? He didn't like going to Seventh-day Adventist churches and being around Adventists. It wasn't rational. Okay? This is an emotional response because of bad experiences when he was young. So that's why he became a Branch Davidian, because technically original Branch Davidian teachings were, we believe everything the Adventists believe, but we have additional doctrines. So he could be an Adventist and believe in Ellen G. White, the Adventist prophet, and could believe in all the doctrines, but then, hey, I got extra stuff too. And then he could stick it to his parents, hey, idiots, I'm better than you. And I mean, he literally did that. I mean, one time my grandfather came over, his father, and he was really just being mean to him. I mean, it wasn't necessary for him to be such an asshole, quite frankly, looking back at his behavior. And my grandfather never came back to visit again, which I wouldn't blame him. And again, they had had a difficult relationship. I'm not completely exonerating my grandfather either. I really don't know what went on specifically between the two, because I can't trust my father to be completely objective about my grandfather. I didn't really know my grandfather very well, but they had a difficult relationship, and my father's religion, the Branch Davidian religion, allowed him to feel superior to Adventists. Now, when David Koresh started his message, my father was, from my perspective as a teenager, okay, I'm 18, my father was what you would call backslidden, okay? We had moved to Texas in 1980 to be closer to the truth because, obviously it's based in Waco. We moved south of Dallas, and my father had gotten a bug up his butt back in 77 to do this big move, because I grew up in Southern California and we were fine there. Really, the move was a disaster. It was a mistake, because my father lasted, by the time he bought this new house in 81 and everything's settled down and we've got this new life in Texas, my father lasted 18 months. Got up one day and he had snapped. And he didn't discuss it, but, I'm watching him. I'm 17. My father's acting weird, And all in one day, goes to work on a new moon Sabbath, which you're not supposed to do. Gets fired or quits, I don't know. There's a guy at work he doesn't like. He doesn't like work anyway because it's full of Southern Baptists, which, I mean, duh. You're moving to Texas. Like, that's what everybody is. But anyway, comes home, calls a guy back in Southern California. Hey, you got any work? Sure. Jumps in his car, drives back to Southern California. This is in fall of 1982. So, and he's really essentially leaving the Branch faith. Okay, he's had it because of situations dealing with Perry Jones, telling him things he doesn't want to hear. I won't go into all the details. Lois Roden telling him to sell his plane, like just casually, oh, sell your plane, Don, no big deal. And my father was depressed and my mom didn't let him do that. And money grubbing from the Rodens, Lois and George Roden wanting to take the money from the sale of the house, and just had become extremely disgruntled with the Branch faith. So we moved back to California eventually. And while we were living in California, so this is in my senior year of high school, my father is not a Branch Davidian anymore. We started eating meat, which you're not supposed to do. Okay. So we started getting letters from mysterious letters from the Living Waters Foundation in one case. Ultimately, these were letters from Vernon Howell, who had just begun his message in 1983. And we're not around, okay? So we don't know any of this. The letters, there were more than one letter, and I think some of them were anonymous because of the prejudice that there would have been against Vernon, because when we knew him in the group previously, he had just been a regular member. One day in a study in like 81 or so, Vernon Howell got up during the meeting and started crying about what a sinner he was, in an unusual display of emotion. I say unusual from the group's perspective. We weren't that kind of group. We didn't display strong emotions like that. It was very, if people are aware of Protestant church services, not Pentecostal, right? That's the thing about Pentecostal services. And even this is just like your standard, Adventists, okay? If anybody who's a Seventh-day Adventist and you go to Adventist church services, they tend to be pretty steady. Sure, you sing and you will give testimony maybe and might get a little animated and excited, but you're not going to start crying and talking about what a sinner you are. So this is an unusual display. When we were driving home that day, my father correctly predicted, he's going to say that he has a message one day, speaking about Vernon Howell, which was true. Okay, back to 1984, and Vernon Howell's message, David Koresh, not yet, has been going on for a few months. And Perry Jones calls us, and he asks, did you guys get the letters? At this point, Perry Jones is a follower of Vernon Howell. And Perry Jones is a longtime Branch Davidian. He actually had been a Davidian back in the day, so like in the late 50s, and then had accepted the Branch Davidian message. And then when Lois Roden became a prophet, that's Benjamin Roden's wife, he accepted that, and then he's now with Vernon Howell, the seventh angel's message. So my father, like I said, he's not really wanting to be a Branch Davidian anymore. Okay, reluctantly, because the problem with him is he hasn't made any kind of formal announcement. He didn't write a letter to the group saying, hey, I'm done with you guys, or call up Lois Roden, hey, no more tithe, I'm done. He just kind of is doing this secretly, kind of. So I'm sure Perry had noticed that my father wasn't around anymore or anything, but whatever. So finally, we're asked to study the letters that we had received in the mails concerning Vernon Howell's new message. But they were very cryptic, quite frankly. They were not well written. I'm sorry. Yeah, not clear at all. And we didn't know who they were from. Because, like I said, there's prejudice against Vernon Howell. So then George Roden sent a letter to the field telling the truth about what was going on in the group. And he said, oh, Vernon Howell with his guitar pleasing tunes. And he also had this really strange idea that Vernon was actually a spy from the Seventh-day Adventist General Conference. See, this is the thing about George. He was, not entirely rational, because we didn't believe that. That's silly. That's a conspiracy theory that is not rational, to believe that Vernon Howell was a General Conference plant in the branch to destroy it, because the General Conference, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, was afraid of the branch. No. So my father then turned against the new message. Okay, well, David Koresh, Vernon Howell, came to Southern California in February of 1984, and I listened to him, and that's when I accepted his message, and I was in high school, senior year. Then my father didn't listen at the time, neither did my mother or my sister. So then there was going to be a big meeting at Mount Carmel Center in 1984 in Passover season, which is roughly around Easter. And my father and my parents agreed that we're going to go attend the meeting, because there was going to be a lot of people there. A lot of Branch Davidians attending this meeting. This was going to be like a big conference of different Branch Davidians going to finally figure out what was going on, right? And so that's where my father pretty much kind of fell in line with Vernon Howell's message, and accepted it and became a member around the Passover of 1984. And it is because of me, because I listened to Vernon Howell first and accepted his message. And they were against it initially. They told me even, well, you can't accept a message so fast. You've got to study it more, which my father was right about that, but he didn't have any credibility with me at this point because he had rejected the Branch Davidian message. You see, my father had made me to sit in studies when I was a child, up all through my childhood for hours being indoctrinated. And even if I didn't understand all the studies or completely grasp them, I was a child, I did over time become conditioned. So by the time I'm a teenager, like 17, his plan has worked, okay? I'm now a Branch Davidian. I think this is the truth. And my father's the one who's the apostate. Like, whoa, but I mean, I can't. Oh, actually, we did get into some pretty, because I'm 18, I'm becoming an adult. You know, when you become an adult, you start pushing back against your parents a little bit. You know, you're still transitioning from your parents being whoa to like they're people, right? And I'm pushing against my father a little bit. We had, like, he even smacked me one time. Yeah, could be violent because we were disagreeing about biblical doctrine or something. So I think my father might have blamed me at one point it was my fault that he ended up following David Koresh. No. No. It was his fault. He was the one that got us into the Branch Davidians in the first place and indoctrinated his little son into being a good little Branch Davidian, and then leaving the faith, but not talking about it, not explaining himself. So from my perspective, he's an apostate. So when I accept Vernon Howell's message, this is a solution to our problem as a group. You know, the administration building had burned down a year previously, and that was the central headquarters where all the printing equipment was stored and everything. So this was like a really important event in the history of the Branch Davidian movement. And you had to explain that theologically. Like, you know, in the real world, buildings burn down, who cares? But no, in the group, this is important. You know, it was like in the Adventist history, the Sanitarium run by Kellogg, John Harvey Kellogg of Kellogg's Cornflakes. If you don't know that story. There's even a movie called Wellsville about this. It's actually pretty good. Matthew Broderick, Bridget Fonda. They go to the San, as it was called back in the day. And it's also got Anthony Hopkins, who plays John Harvey Kellogg. And Dana Carvey plays his estranged son. It's a pretty good movie. Anyway. Yeah, so this is the conflict between us, you know, hey, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. But my father did eventually become a very good Branch Davidian under Vernon. Okay, so to go back into the future again, my father was living in Pomona when he got the tape. Okay, back to the tape that I sent to him. And he's a loyal Branch Davidian under David Koresh at this point. Okay, now David Koresh has changed his name. He's got the new light. And I'm in opposition to him now. And I have sent my father the tape. Yeah, it didn't go well. So what happened is I got a phone call one evening from my parents. And it was my mother and my father. And they're very worried about me. At this point, my mother, I think, was back in Pomona because we had been visiting her locally at the hospital in Waco, but she's back in Pomona, so they're on the phone with me. Okay, now, one thing I want to describe that happened before this is we had taken some family pictures. Actually, I have that somewhere. So this is Olin Mills. It's a photo studio. This picture was taken in 1990, and this is our family in 1990. I have obviously my wife. That's me. The beard is a bad sign because I'm growing a beard because I want to be like David Koresh. He has a beard, and so that's not good because I don't normally wear a beard. My wife doesn't like it either. So, and that's my two oldest daughters. There's a missing daughter here who was born later. We had these pictures taken and sent to my mother sometime in early 1990. So I got the strangest phone call from my mom. She's crying, sobbing, really, and she can't keep the pictures. She's not allowed, I have to send them back. And I'm like, okay, and I can't, I don't really ask any. It's a very short phone call, and then she hangs up, and again, this goes back to before, in my last discussion, I'm not thinking clearly. Remember I told you spiraling into the pit of fear. You have to watch part 1. How do you get a cold out of your brain? If you want to know that story. So, obviously this is because David Koresh has commanded families to sever ties, right? And you can't have pictures of loved ones. And he made people get rid of pictures because he's clamping down. This is one of the signs of a cult, breaking up families, because he knows that family ties are a threat to his power. So let's sever them, break them down. He was always continually getting worse. I mean, we got out really in the nick of time. Those from 1989 onward, those were the worst years in terms of control. He started getting really super culty. So yeah, that happened, and then my parents have called, and my mom keeps saying, because I was telling my mom about David Koresh. He's not God, which is self-evident to me. Again, like I said, I'm not so far gone. I'm not willing to accept that David Koresh is Jesus Christ, and I'm not willing to accept that David Koresh is God under any circumstances whatsoever. That's called crossing the line for me. But she kept saying it over. He is David. He is. Like, oh God. My mom is, for me, she's gone. Losing her mind. She's better now. She's fine. But yeah, she was gone. My dad gets on the phone. You're a very disrespectful young man. And he says something about this is a beautiful message. Okay. But they don't have any arguments. Okay. I had, in the video, in the previous testimony, I had laid out some basic premise, conclusion arguments that I had latched onto as a central argument against David Koresh's claims to be the Lamb. My parents have no counter argument to that, because that's where I am right now. You need to give me a logical argument, not appealing to emotion, which of course that's where my mom is. This is all very emotional for her. She's not thinking logically, which whatever. And then my dad, again, he's stuck in this trap of fear. But he's getting more angry, because he's my father. You're a disrespectful young man. Okay. Anyway, this conversation fails to go anywhere. And so they hang up. And then that's where David Koresh calls me. Okay, so now we have to tell that story. So I answer the phone, and it's David Koresh. So he's in California. He's at the what would be known as the White Avenue house in Laverne, California, which is the house where the women stay in California. This house had been purchased by a member, Jeff Little, who passed away in the fire. And he was a very well-paid computer programmer, so he had access to a lot of funds. So I think the house was in his name. It might have been jointly purchased with him and another member. I'm not sure. So he's there with his many of his followers are in the room with him, and he's on the phone talking to me. So one of the things he says is, he's humbling himself, calling me. Okay. All right. So I don't remember all the exact details of the phone call, but the general issue is, I've been told that David Koresh has taken all the wives. Okay, that's what Mark Bro has told me. That was one of the things on the tape. That's the basic reveal of the tape. That is a secret. Okay. So one of the things that David Koresh does is he denies this emphatically. And he puts Steve Schneider on the phone, and Steve Schneider also denies this emphatically. I would say convincingly, from the sense that they certainly sound like they're telling the truth. And so I'm in a bit of a difficult situation here now, because on the one hand, I've got Mark Bro telling me something, who I trust. But then I have both David Koresh and Steve Schneider telling me Mark Bro's essentially lying. And, Mark Bro's far away in Australia. It's hard to communicate with him. Plus, I'm still vulnerable to David Koresh's I have emotional ties with him, I had been following him for 5 years. Well, I've been gone for a year, but I had been following him for a while, right? So I've been in the group, going through experiences. We had been more friends at one point. The friendship is long gone, though. There is not a friendship thing going on between us so much. It lasted for a little while back in the early days. But we had some experiences together. We drove all the way to California once on motorcycles together. So, there's emotional ties there, pulls there. So one thing that he does, he wants me to come to California to listen to his message. Okay. Now, again, I had just, not too long ago, I told this story, gone out to Mount Carmel and stood at the gate, and he didn't want to talk to me. So, I didn't make a big deal about that. I didn't mention it even, because I could have complained, like, well, why didn't you, whatever. Okay. I'm not in a mode in this conversation to necessarily bring up all these grievances from the past. I'm in a mode of, he kicked me out of the group. I deserved it because I had broken the rules. Again, if you watched any of my previous videos, how David Koresh destroyed my marriage, I don't know any of that stuff, okay? I don't know any of that. That's all future conclusions that I have drawn. At this point, in roughly April of 1990, I've got some information that tells me that he's wrong, but I also have an emotional pull with him. So the other thing that he does is he begins giving studies on the Psalms, a book of the Bible, right? Hebrew poetry. Okay, now I have to explain what that's all about. Okay, so I apologize, but we are going to have to read a little Bible here. So now I need to explain what is David Koresh's message at this point. What is his deal? And I need to do it in a very abbreviated way. I'm sorry, I've got an itch here. My goodness. All right. Okay, so I've talked about that David Koresh claimed to be the Lamb of Revelation, and I told it from the point of view of me thinking he's wrong about that. But what was his position about that? How did David Koresh believe he was the Lamb of Revelation? So to summarize very quickly, Book of Revelation, last book in the Bible, okay? John is told in Revelation 4 to come up hither. Okay, that's an important catchphrase in the movement at this time. So come up hither is to go to heavenly places. And when John goes up hither, he sees the throne of God. Okay? And all kinds of really amazing things there. I'm not going to go into super detail. In chapter 5, we talk about the Lamb. And the central problem that is resolved in Revelation 4 and 5 is there's a book that is sealed. It cannot be opened. But except there is one being who can open it. It's the Lamb of Revelation 5. And it's, as I mentioned, it's a bizarre-looking lamb. It's got 7 horns, 7 eyes. These are symbolic things that mean something to Koresh, which I won't get into. Okay. And then the Lamb begins to open the seals. And that's the rest of the book of the Revelation is about, first seal, yada, yada, right? The first 4 seals, for example, are the proverbial 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which are very much a cultural thing that you'll see at some point or another. Okay, so how does this work? Well, David Koresh wants me at this point to go to California to essentially get the seven seals, to learn the seals. I have initially refused to go. So he is giving me a short little study on the Psalms. Why? Well, because the way the book is opened is you go to the Old Testament, which the Psalms is one of the books of the Old Testament, and then he reads some of that, and then he ties it into the New Testament. And he connects the last book of the Bible, Revelation, in with the Old Testament, right? And click, and and that becomes an opening of the book. And you're sitting there in a study with him. This is a generic member, right? A recruit. And wow. Amazing. That connection. Psalm 45 is a perfect example of this process. He read Psalm 45. Psalm 45 is a marriage poem. The Psalms, of course, are all Hebrew poetry. They are very devotional, if anybody's familiar. So in other words, the kinds of things that you would read to, if you want to read poetry about God and to be inspired and things like that. For David Koresh, the Psalms are like a biography of his life. Yeah. It's like reading his story. And then if he ties it into the book of Revelation with the seals, and he proves it from Scripture, from the point of view of a member of the group, as you're sitting there, you're going through this experience. And it's a multimedia presentation with theatrics and the whole 9 yards. I mean, a member obviously wouldn't view it as theatrics. They would be viewing it as this is a genuine, inspired prophet of God, as they are inspired, presenting their message from God and giving me all of this truth and all of this biblical knowledge, right? So the Psalm 45 says, "You are fairer than the children of men. Grace is poured into thy lips. Therefore God has blessed thee forever." Talking about this king. Because it starts out, I speak of things which I have made touching the king. I'm not reading the whole thing because I don't want to bore you. So it's about a king. He's got a sword. Gird thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty. Right? And ride prosperously because of the truth. So we have a king on a horse riding. There's arrows. Thy arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. King on a horse, bow, war, crowned king, obviously. All this imagery here. Okay? All right. So then we go to Revelation 6. So this is the first seal. Okay? I'm only going to do this once. I'm not going to bore you too much. We go to Revelation 6. And Revelation 6, verse 1. I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals. This is the first seal. The beast says, "Come and see," I saw, behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, bow and arrow, and a crown. It's a king. Was given to him, and he went forth conquering, war, bows and arrows, and to conquer. Well, that's what I just read you in Psalm 45 in the Old Testament. That's right here. Revelation 6. Which, for the sake of argument, sure, I agree. Yes. This is step one, right? So imagine you're in a study and you're like, you're already in the right frame of mind. You want to learn the Bible. You might be an Adventist who knows, well, yeah, there's Latter-day Prophets because Ellen G. White was a prophet, so why can't we have more prophets? And you've already gone to a Revelation seminar, which is how they recruit people, typically, sometimes. And you've been taught in the book of Revelation for the last days, so you're like, well, yeah, this is Revelation, right? Ellen G. White said all books of the Bible meet and end in Revelation. So literally, the book of Revelation is like the grand finale of the Bible. So if you can, as David Koresh said many times, harmonize, connect, chronicle all of the prophecies together in this tapestry of taking them all and properly integrating them into a whole and connecting them to the book of Revelation, then it's this really amazing thing, And he, okay, so back to the phone conversation. Okay, so this is what he's doing at this point. This is his argument, as he says in one of his tapes. This is what I have shown you, he says, and this is an experience that you have. And the members, the people are in the room with him at this time when I'm talking to him on the phone. They sound like a chorus in the background. As he's talking to me, he will ask a question. Isn't that true? Yes. Or no. Yeah, I can hear them in the whole room. It's kind of weird. So he starts with Psalms 1, right? Literally. I mean, I've got my Bible. In fact, it's this Bible right here. This Bible I've had for almost 40 years. This is a King James version. David Elliott Buns. This is a Bible my father gave me. This is the Bible has the notes in it and everything that I took when I was in the group. There's notes that I took when I was... Okay, anyway. So, yeah. So he starts with Psalm 1. And Psalm 1 is, blessed is the man who walks in the counsel, not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, right? But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and he meditates on it day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, and bring forth fruit and seed. So all this great stuff about godly people, right? Well, that's David Koresh, right? But the ungodly are not so. They're like the chaff which the wind drives away. It's a harvest imagery. You're throwing the grain up in the air, and then the chaff is all the crap you don't want. The heavy grain falls back down, and the chaff, it just kind of blows away. That's the imagery here. So the chaff is the evil stuff that you don't want. We're chaff. Like I'm chaff because I'm bad, right? David Koresh is great. The ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. That's the congregation would be like the people that I'm talking to right now. I'm on the phone with David Koresh. His followers are there. They're the congregation of the righteous. I'm a sinner, potentially. I mean, he's trying to convert me again, right? The Lord knows the ways of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. I'm ungodly. And so that's Psalm 1. And he's going to go through in this study with me on the phone. We're literally going to go through Psalm 1, Psalm 1, 2, 3, here's 6. I think we make it to Psalm 10, which is way over here. And I'm not going to do that. But, that's what we're doing. We're reading his story. This is the story of David Koresh in the Bible and connecting it to Revelation. And man, let me tell you, it's good. It's good stuff. He's pulling me in. See, what happened was initially he wanted me to come out. And I said, no, I'm not going to inconvenience myself and go all the way to California just to sit and listen to you. And so he gives me this study on the Psalms, and he's pulling me into this world. And, okay, as he's doing this, I'm starting to waver. And by the time he's done, I am willing to go to California. I'm thinking seriously about it anyway. Now, I guess fortunately for me, he kind of, I guess, the only way I can describe it is at this point he's lost himself a little bit of confidence in me in terms of his ability to influence me. Because he doesn't understand the effect he's had on me. And the reason why I say that is because he gave me a phone number to call if I wanted to arrange to come. But he gave me the phone number to the Pomona house, which was my parents' house. Okay, so there's two houses close by in Southern California. One's in Pomona, one's in next door Laverne, the one I told you about. That's where he's at with the women, and that's where the studies take place. And then the Pomona house is my parents' house that they own. And he doesn't spend a lot of time there. He gives me the phone number to that house. He doesn't trust me with the Laverne House location or phone number because I'm not in the group. So he's being secretive. So this actually is a good thing, and I'll explain. So I'm kind of in shock. I remember I had purchased a brand new computer with some tax refund money that I got in 1990. And as he's talking to me, I'm looking over at my computer depressed because he liked to take things away from people. So for me, it was computers because I'm a computer nut. So I knew he'd probably take it away because that's his thing, you know, likes to make you miserable. Just the way I look at it now, okay, at the time, maybe I didn't necessarily see it this way. But the way I look at it now is Vernon would want to like make somebody miserable in some way, take something away from them that they liked. And then I guess the purpose of it was, so every now and then Vernon could sit back and think about whatever. Like he would think about, I took this thing away from David and it makes him miserable. And he could go, yeah, you know, it would make him feel good. I'm serious. That's what's going on. It's like, oh yeah, I really stuck it to David, you know, and this would do, he'd be doing this with everything. I'm sure he did it with taking wives away. Yeah, I've got Steve's wife, man. That's, you know, I mean, he might not verbalize it that way. When he talks about it, he'll be very serious. Well, I didn't want to, but, you know, God made me. But no, he's taking satisfaction in dominating people. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is at this point in time, I have wavered, and now I'm considering going back to listen to David Koresh and sit and have the experience that I described here, where I'm going to receive the 7 seals to figure out if David Koresh is the Lamb or not, which, you know, okay. But I don't make the decision right then. And I remember thinking on the phone, well, he doesn't really understand that he's kind of got me right now, but he's hanging up quickly. He's got something else to do, whatever. The phone conversation ends. And I've got a phone number and, hey, call if you decide to go. Okay. So he hangs up and I'm thinking. So that's the next part of the story. Now, remember, the only reason that I'm even thinking about going to California, going through the time and expense, I don't think he offered to pay for it. Yeah, I would have had to pay for it and, you know, get time off of work. Incredibly inconvenient, which, you know, David Koresh didn't have a problem inconveniencing people. He didn't care. The only reason I'm thinking about this is because I have been lied to. Okay, I have been told that no, actually, wives aren't being taken. Well, from David Koresh's point of view, from previous things I've talked about, he may be thinking that, oh no, I didn't take anybody's wife, whatever, you know, he's playing games, but whatever's going on, essentially I've been lied to. I've been made to think that all of this business about, you know, for example, Steve and Judy not being together anymore is not true. Okay. So that's the only reason. In fact, I remember hearing through the grapevine, I don't know how I know this, but I think my sister, who was in California listening to this, tells Vernon, like, I mean, it's my sister. She knows me pretty well. Yeah, Vernon, he's not, you know, what are you doing? You're going to bring him here. He's going to, well, David, sorry. You're going to bring him here and he's just going to find out what's going on, and he's going to, you know, he's going to get mad. He's not going to, which I guess probably was true. I hope so. I don't know. I hope that's what would have happened. Okay, so next day, which is a shopping day for us. And get up in the morning and I inform my wife, again, she's not going to tell me what to do. not that kind of wife. Maybe she should have been, I don't know. Well, whatever. I mean, what's she going to do? She can't say, David, you can't go. I mean, that's not going to work, right? So, I call the number because I've decided, okay, well, I should go listen, at least. Well, like I said, the number is not where he's at, and there isn't anybody home. I'm probably calling in morning worship or something. There's nobody at the address that I'm calling, so their number, I don't get anybody. Fortunate. Okay, go shopping. So, so while we're shopping, standard grocery shopping, I'm like, half of my brain is grabbing things, putting them in the cart, and the other half is running 1,000,000 miles per hour, thinking about everything that I know, logically, subjecting it to a logical analysis. Like a computer program running. I remember this. I'm thinking at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Critically. I don't know that it's called critical thinking at the time, or at least I'm not thinking of it that way. I don't know how many of you are aware of the process of critical thinking. It's actually a really useful thing to do when you're trying to figure things out. There's whole books on it. You can look it up. Anyway, I'm just, I am thinking about this. And of course, it takes us a few hours to go shopping, and I'm just thinking about everything that I know, everything I know about Mark, everything that it was on the tape, everything that David Koresh said to me, and other things that he's taught in the past. I'm taking all of the information I have, integrating it together, processing it in my head, turning it over. Okay. And then I remember this like it was yesterday. We're done shopping. I get in the car. We're going to go home. Go to turn the key to the ignition. And as I turn the car on, click. Processing complete. And I say out loud, my wife's, in the car with my children in the back seat. I say, nope, I'm not going. Something's wrong. I'm not going. Something's wrong. I'm going to find out. Yeah, I was like, no, I'm not buying it. No. And I was right. This was a correct decision. So, yeah, I didn't go. Instead, I think I made a tape or wrote a letter to Mark. Not sure. Something. I did more communication and got further clarification from Mark on certain points. And there's more dialogue going on and more discussion and more reasoning things out. So probably about a week later, David Koresh calls me again. Now this time, yeah, I'm slipping away rapidly from any control. So I think the first thing out of his mouth was, bring forth your arguments, and in this arrogant tone, like I'm some bozo, and he's just going to swat my arguments down. Again, it gets to this lamb thing. Okay? I try to explain to him, like, you can't be the lamb of Revelation. It's not possible by definition. Okay? This thing I described about the lamb is the root of David, and Jesus Christ says he's the root of David, and so, lamb equals Jesus Christ, this thing. He was saying that the root means umbilical cord of a baby. And the root, of course, of an umbilical cord, the umbilical cord connects from a baby to the mother. And the mother is the spirit, because in Branch Davidian teachings, the spirit is a mother, a feminine figure. I don't think I mentioned that before. Lois Roden was the one that originated the family in heaven. So you have God the Father, God the Mother, right, the Holy Spirit, and then the Son, born from the Father and Mother, the Trinity. This is a primary core Branch Davidian doctrine, family in heaven. And so Koresh would refer to his mother. So his mother, the Spirit, is the root of David. And since the Spirit is the Spirit of Christ is the mother, then since he has the Spirit of Christ, right, he's that's the way he's looking at this. If you understand, I mean, it's a bit opaque, but whatever. Yeah, I didn't buy that because that's not what the text says. Okay? He's going into this long, what I would call convoluted explanation, which, like, to me, if you're looking at it like A to B, my argument is A, B, C. Simple. I discussed this. His argument is, it's all over the place. So there's a principle called Occam's razor, which, if you have different explanations for something, typically, statistically, the simplest explanation will probably be the correct one. The one that's least confusing, least complex, right? Just boom, boom, boom. That's not 100% true, but it's usually right. That's the way I'm thinking. So, we don't get anywhere on that. The other thing that he was doing is he was misquoting the text. I won't get into that, but I just noticed. I didn't agree with the way he was this is reading is ultimately a technical process, right? So if you're reading something, you have to use rules of grammar, syntax, and word meanings and all that stuff. We all know that. So there's a right way and wrong way to read things, and I'm not agreeing with the way he's reading particular verse. On a technical level, I don't agree. And I'd had problems with him with this kind of stuff in the past. And these problems that have accumulated over the course of the last several years have all come back to me, as I described, when I started thinking about things and the mistakes he's made in the past in combination with the ones he's making now on this second phone conversation. He's losing me very quickly. I'm not agreeing with him. Okay. So I think this might have been the phone conversation where I just became exhausted to the point, emotionally exhausted, and I just put the phone down and ran out the door. It's quite possible. Yeah, because he'll talk your ear off. I had to stop at some point. I can't take this anymore. I've got to think, That's one of the ways that he gets you, right? He wants to keep you in the group, keep you there, and keep you in the environment so that he can maintain and keep the emotional pressure up, the fear, right? Fear is how cults maintain control, very typically. If a cult leader can find on you that place where they can hook into you and, now I've got them, and they can pull you around with that fear, they've got you. There's a sad story, flash forward, a year or so, and Mark Bro had come to California on some business. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he met with a couple of Branch Davidian followers in Anaheim, California. I was there too because I had met with him. We went to Disneyland. Yes, that was one of the signs of, oh boy, that would be something absolutely forbidden in David Koresh's world. You do not go to Disneyland. No, that's wasting money and just frivolous and whatever. Anyway, yeah, you would never want to just take a break sometimes and just relax. Everything's always, nose to the grindstone. Study your Bibles all day long. Whatever. Okay, so he met with, one of the Davidians he met with was Jeff Little. I mentioned him previously, the one that purchased the house. Jeff was a nice guy. I think about him and it makes me sad. Yeah. So Jeff actually began to waver when Mark was presenting his points to Jeff, just like me. It's impacting him logically. It's breaking through the fear, the shield of fear. We've penetrated the shields of fear and we're getting down into, getting into your brain and actually having an impact. It had that effect on Jeff because Jeff was a programmer. He can think logically about things. Obviously, that's a potential thing that a programmer might be able to do because you spend a lot of time thinking about logic and whatever. Okay, well, the thing was that Jeff was still so scared, and I don't think he had anywhere to go, right? I mean, so he told Mark, I can see some of the things you're saying, but it didn't. He wasn't able to really break out because he just probably went back to Mount Carmel or whatever and cracked the whip on him, get him back in line, and because that's the problem with when you're in a cult is, you've got two. You might be thinking about leaving the cult, so you've got option A. I'm in the cult and this is the thing, but then option B is, well, there's this collection of information and facts and this person over here is telling me something. But option A is, it's the fear. It's got a super powerful gravitational pull on you, right? It's pulling you in. And option B, it's some guy, and you're not afraid of him. Like, it's just some dude like me. Like, yeah, it's just David running his mouth. Who cares about David? He's just some stupid idiot. Screw him. But no, David Koresh. Oh man. It's like in The Lion King. There's a scene where the hyenas are going, say Mufasa, Mufasa. Ooh. It's a really cool scene. Like, that's David Koresh. Oh my God, yeah, David Koresh. And people are scared of David Koresh because he has power and influence and control, and he's the lamb, and he'll throw you into hell. And David Koresh was very clear in a presentation he made. He made a tape that he sent to Australia to get those people back under control. I named it Our Foundation because that's what he talks about. I have the tape. I have the transcript. It's an hour and a half long. I'm not going to bore you with that. But one of the things he says, remember I told you about Psalm 45 and the first seal and all that presentation and how it connects together, and that's part of opening the book. David Koresh says on this tape, direct quote, "Now go against that revelation of truth, and I guarantee you, I'll kill you one day." That's a direct quote. He wasn't screwing around. Now, I like to think, that was 34 years ago, because I did do that, go against revelation of truth. You know, what I would actually rename that enormous pile of bullshit. Okay, that was what I would call it, but whatever. I went against that quite verbally, intentionally, and I'm still alive. I haven't been killed by David Koresh, because he said he would kill me. So in order to fulfill that prophecy, David Koresh would have to kill me, I guess. After the fire and all of that went down, my father had been apprehended by the ATF, but they didn't charge him ultimately. And he came back to the house in Pomona to live with my mother and my sister and to start a normal life again. But when he very first got back, oh man, was he wired. He was like scared. And he's literally telling me and my wife, you know, that David Koresh is going to come back and chop our heads off. Like he thought it would happen any day. Yeah, I remember thinking at the time, you know, dead people don't chop people's heads off. So I'm not worried about that. And, you know, that was 30 years ago, and David Koresh is still dead. I mean, you know, I'm sorry about the tragedy and what happened. It's not my fault. I didn't kill him. But he's gone. So that's it. There's no framework for 2023 in terms of prophecies of David Koresh. David Koresh taught that things were supposed to be wrapped up by 1995. Yeah, specific teaching. There wasn't supposed to be anything past 1995. So here we are now 28 years past that date. And we're still here. So life goes on. So to wrap it up, I guess, you know, at this point, Koresh has called me twice. I told you I probably hung up the phone or put the phone down, ran down the street to get some fresh air. And my wife has to hang up the phone for me or tell Koresh, you know, he's gone. He doesn't want to talk anymore. And then what happened after this? Well, I just kept studying. Like I said, I took this tape that Koresh made to send to Australia. I was sent a copy. I transcribed that and put it into a written form. The reason I did that was to get away from Koresh's emotional manipulation on the tape. He's screaming. He goes hysterical on the tape at one point, just starts losing it. Becomes absolutely crazy mad with rage.
Follow the vision. He's got a buck. He gives the buck to the lamb. The lamb shows you the mountain white horse. Get it in your mind. That's what he says. You stupid idiot. Get it in your mind. He says his heart has declared a teacher. If you don't follow the truth, you're going to hell. Psalms 90. You better start fearing God, because he's going to burn you in the lowest hell. His love, he's trying to show you. He's going to kill you if you don't listen. Listen to Lord. You don't know his fear now. You don't know his terror yet. You haven't seen his anger. But you go ahead and dare him. Calling another fellow brother a fornicator or a thief or a liar, you stand in the judgment of God. What's God gonna call you one day? How much evidence does he have against you, poor, weak dust? Did you hear Psalms 45? Get it in your mind. Is that the first seal? Get it in your mind. You fools! Slow to believe God. Fools! in your mind. So you believe in a movie about spaceships. So do they. Look what they do with it. Fools. Get wise, wisdom says. Get wise. The man on the white horse comes first. That's Psalms 1. That's Psalms 2. That's Psalms 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Learn them. That's what God says is going to happen. Do you hear? Do you understand? It's war. These governments of this world are coming to an end. The minds of men are going to be focused upon a fact. Go ahead and laugh. Go ahead and muse in your mind and see what happens to you, fools.
And, yeah. I might play some overlaying what I'm saying now just so you can get an idea of what he's saying. It's really, it could be kind of scary, I assume, if you were there in the room with him. And he's really serious about what he's talking about. It's pretty scary, but I wanted to get the emotions out of it, transcribe it, and just read it and study it as a written document. So I did that. So by the summer of 1990, we moved back to California. I keep studying. And yeah, he called me one more time that year for the Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a Jewish Day of Atonement, right? If you don't know that, Branch Davidians kept that day. So he called me one last time. This wasn't the last time I talked to him. I'll maybe discuss I do have a tape of a phone conversation we had in another few months, but he called me one last time in 1990. And at this point, I'm not swayed by him. The spell is broken. I've learned too much. I have been studying not just his own teachings, but I've gone back and studied Branch Davidian teachings and Davidian teachings. I've got some serious problems with original Davidian teachings. And technically, since this is a chain of truth, right? This is a stair step going to ultimate truth. If there's a break if there's a weak link in the chain, which would be a Davidian message problem, and he's dependent on that technically, then it would nullify his teaching automatically, because, it would be the past truth that he's relying on. Oops, it's actually wrong. So therefore, he would be wrong that way, which I don't think he really would have been interested in ultimately, but for me, that was another nail in the coffin. But he told me in this conversation, I'll close with this, because this is another sign of a cult. He told me, we're talking about this issue of him making mistakes and the mistakes that I found. I made another video about the 19th century, if you want to watch that, okay? Because that's another weird thing about him, which I won't explain. But he did say to me, I have never been wrong. Now, at this point now, 30 years later, to me, really arguing about Koresh from a point of view of, this particular scripture or whatever is, that's, no, that's not really the main issue here. The issue is that even remotely rational to believe that a human being on this earth, which is an undeniable fact, right? David Koresh, whatever else he was, whatever else you believe that he was, is a human being who breathes air, does every normal human thing. That such a person in that category could be infallible to the ultimate degree, where they just simply never make any mistake. That is absurd. Period. It's not possible. That's not what it means to be human. I don't think that Ellen G., no past branch prophet or anybody in the modern world would have said that. They would have admitted, well, of course I make mistakes. Okay, so this was, to me, really the final failure of David Koresh, is to just admit, hey, I make mistakes too. Now, of course, he admitted that he was a sinner, but it's not the same thing. You can't tell me I have never been wrong. I simply cannot accept that. I might as well just, give you my brain. Okay, here. I'm not going to use this anymore. I don't need it. I'm not going to do that. All right. That's it for now.